Welcome to the Just Regular Guys podcast,
where we give our non-expert opinions on the things that matter.
All right. Well, we're back, finally.
It is the first recording of 2025.
Yes. And,
welcome back.
Heck of a start to the year so far. We got lots to talk about. Feel like doing a little recap and mentioning that, we basically, I think our last episode we wound up recording towards the end of November, if not the beginning of December, something like that. And we basically, decided to take a little break for the holidays and kind of like sort out some thoughts on, how the podcast is going to be, stuff like that, right? So let's see. I don't know. We can jump right into it, I guess. But do you have anything else you wanted to kind of intro with?
Well, to copy a million Facebook posts, the other day was a great day to be an Ohioan.
True.
We got JD Vance, we got the Ohio State University,
right? Yeah,
winning the championship.
Yeah, they had a big win. I'm not big on college. Like, I don't follow college football much, but I'm glad to see the popular local team do pretty well. UC is technically more local to me, but
I probably only live like 40 minutes from OSU.
Yeah,
I'm pretty close.
Yeah. All right. Well, speaking of all that stuff that's happened since we recorded last, we obviously, so the time of recording this, we'll kind of date the episode a little bit, but Inauguration Day was yesterday. It was a pretty big day, pretty, I felt like it was exciting to kind of watch everything actually happen, actually come to fruition. Like, Trump won, he had a pretty handy victory, which we talked about previously. And now he's officially the president again and got to work right away on certain things, like he said he would. Signed executive orders like in front of the crowd at the like right after the inaugural parade, which I thought was kind of crazy, actually.
He's a rock star, dude. Yeah. He was throwing the pens out.
Yeah, he's definitely a performer at the beginning. Like, you can see all of that, all the years of TV, like being on TV and stuff at play.
Although I did see a comment on a video of that where he's throwing it out that I didn't necessarily think. I thought it was him just being a rock star, right? But the comment was, the symbolism is, you helped me sign these, the power to the people, right?
Sure. Yeah.
Which also,
yeah,
I would love one of those pens.
Oh, yeah. No, I was thinking, I thought it was cool watching him sign with them because, they're like presidential Sharpies. Like, right. It's not somebody you could just buy on Amazon. It's like probably pretty special to have one. So I thought it was cool too. So yeah, I guess we can start with, actually, let's start with more of a recap. So instead of what happened most recently, let's talk a little bit about kind of what's led up to this. I think I would like to do.
Yeah.
So, because honestly, we have a lot to talk about just with regard to the inauguration itself and like how it went and stuff like that. But probably one of the bigger, I think there's probably been a couple of things that have kind of made the headlines in the last like month and a half or so. One of the biggest things that was, pretty significant controversy. I know I kind of, was back and forth with some people on Facebook about it, and, social media was just going crazy about it, was basically, I'm just going to go with the short version because, we were talking about it briefly before we started recording, but basically, like, I didn't dig into it that much because, from what I saw, it was a pretty clear cut, it was pretty conclusive what was going on. And I didn't feel like, well, actually, I should say what I'm talking about first. So that is that the CEO of a very large, I think potentially the biggest, I don't remember if that's true or not, but one of the biggest healthcare companies in America, which is was Blue Cross. Is that right?
I thought it was United
Oh yeah,
Healthcare,
United. You're right. Yeah.
and that is I only know because that's who my wife and I
Oh, interesting.
have.
Yeah. So the CEO of United Healthcare was shot to death. I hesitated for a second because I was like, "Can we say that?" I guess we can say whatever we want because it's. But anyways, he was shot to death like on the street in public, basically, by like a masked gunman who was like using a silenced handgun and fled the scene, whatever. And at first when it was just breaking news, there was already an immediate kind of response. Like I remember before we had any idea who was associated with it with the murder, this news was spreading, and I remember seeing comments on TikTok where people were like, "Oh, sorry, my sympathy has been declined" and stuff like that. Like,
Out of network. My
yeah, it's
tears
out
are
of
out of
network,
network.
right? Yeah, stuff like that. And I was like, "Wow, I kind of can't believe people are reacting like this." Well, then, once they could put a face, we had someone who was responsible for the action. It got even worse because I'm not really sure how to pronounce his last name. Don't really care that much to even say it, but this guy named Luigi is responsible, and it was supposed to essentially be a pretty big like statement taking this guy's life. Even so, insofar as he, engraved words on the bullet casings, I believe,
Yeah,
and
like a mafia movie, dude.
yeah, and so, anyways, once they put a face to the name, so to speak, people basically started like praising this guy.
Right.
I mean, that was my perception and what I was seeing all over the internet
Yeah,
was
people obviously, he's a good looking guy, right?
sure,
He's a
yeah,
young guy.
yeah,
Um,
clean cut,
yeah. Uh, in great shape. I don't know if he was in the
yeah,
military or anything,
right,
but super great shape. The fun. I mean, there's a couple funny jokes, right? Everybody loves to make jokes about dark events. Like you can like Mario, like where you been, brother?
yeah,
Like Mario and Luigi, of course.
right,
He had a Pokemon as his profile picture, like
mm,
his cover photo. It
mhm,
was Breloom, which
uh,
is a weird one, but
yeah,
so people started, talking about that Pokemon with him.
yeah,
But yeah, I mean, so when I first heard it, I figured, it was almost like the guy didn't take a bribe or something. Like I
yeah,
thought it was just like corporate hit
right,
assassination happens all the time, right?
sure,
But I don't think they would have put a face on this guy like they did if that's what it was, right? So and then
yeah,
they started making all the manifesto stuff, available. I don't really know the story. It's not really like super interesting to me, but like you said, what is interesting is the celebration of a killing, right?
right,
Like regardless of who it is, very odd, right?
yeah,
And like women, being infatuated with them, super strange, which they some of them do with serial killers and stuff anyway. So I guess I can get that, but uh very very odd. What anything in particular you wanted to talk about there?
no, no, it's just the same for me. Like the actual details of like what he said in his manifesto and stuff like that, not really that interesting to me because, like I said, it's kind of it's an open and shut case in my eyes. This guy literally murdered someone in cold blood. The guy was, like innocent. He wasn't defending himself, anything like that. He was taking his life for a motive, that he saw as justified, and he was making a statement about that. And what I think is really significant and shocking is that it resonated with so many people, like so much so that a large I don't know if I would say a majority, but a large amount of the people that are, pretty actively involved in social media and, post and, ever post on X, stuff like that. They were, like large groups of people were all kind of like celebrating this and saying like, basically, basically I would say the common perspective was that it was not only something that was justified because of how, in their opinion, grossly like warped, I guess, our healthcare system is in America, but also was like like the praiseworthy part comes from the fact that he's drawing attention to it, right?
Right.
Which is like, I just think it's terrible because, like, first of all, one of the things that's great about this country is not necessarily our healthcare; it's our Constitution. We have you have the First Amendment, you have the right to go protest and to go make your voice heard and to, you know, demonstrate your opinion in ways that are not only more respectful to other people, but also are like, you know, legal and encouraged and, that sort of thing, like things that are an actual right to you, as opposed to this, which, taking someone else's life for the sake of proving a point, I just think is,
Right. Which I guarantee, I saw briefly, I don't know if this is true. I don't know anything that Luigi himself had some medical issues that were declined, whatever. If that is the case, what are the odds the CEOs had anything to do with it
right,
being declined, right?
right.
For one. For two, you know, um, like what you were kind of getting at, the pen is mightier than the sword. No,
Hmm.
right? Like
Hmm.
conversation building and those consequences of conversation are permanent, right?
Hmm.
We got more memes, I think, than actual change from this murder, right?
Yeah.
Like
Well,
businesses were saying, "Oh, Luigi was cooking pizzas with me. He wasn't
yeah.
wherever on whatever day."
Yeah. Really, honestly, in my opinion, just a shocking, like, it's one of those things where I think we're almost describing it like to someone who was completely unaware of it. And that's a little bit difficult because you kind of just had to like witness what was happening for yourself. But for anybody that did witness it and also like, shares our perspective, because I'm quite sure that, somebody probably is hearing this and agrees with what happened, like thinks it was justified and so on. But nonetheless, anyway, if you're familiar with what we're talking about, then like you probably recognize what I found to be most disturbing and shocking, which was just how widespread the, I guess, consensus was that like this was not something that was just blatantly objectively wrong. So pretty crazy. I don't know if there's that much more to say about it, but it was a pretty big deal for I mean, a couple of weeks, I'd say.
I would imagine you either were someone like us where we're like, "Oh, that's, oh, that sucks. Like I died." And then you see the reaction, you're like, "Oh," or you were one of the people celebrating. I
Yeah.
doubt you were any in any group other than those two.
Right. Yeah, I agree. Yeah. Yeah, that's the other thing is it was pretty divisive. It was like, yeah. So anyway, I don't know. I still haven't wrapped my head around it. I feel like I would say a lot more about how like wrong I think it was and stuff like that, but I still like kind of have trouble understanding how it is that so many people took the position they did. So, but yeah, I think that's about all I had before we get to our new president.
Well, in the same realm of our new president, have you seen any fun social media complaints about yesterday?
Oh yeah. So
Before we talk
so
about the day itself.
I was gonna say, so there's plenty to cover, but one of those things is most definitely the response of the people. Now, it's pretty worth noting that, while Trump had a pretty big win, it was still, as it always is, like a little more than half the country, basically, right? That's a good way to, you know, summarize it. That means about half the country is still out there and not only was unwilling to vote for Trump, but quite frankly, probably hates him, right? Like Trump is that controversial that like almost everyone I know that doesn't find him at all reasonable or think he's generally going to be better for the country, anything like that, they hate his guts, right? Um, so with that being said, there was no shortage of people who were, seemed like they were just looking for anything that happened yesterday to lob against him and say, "Look, see, I told you so. He's evil. Like this is everything. This is the last." That's the one
The
I
last
hear.
election.
Yeah, the last election, which is just insane. But um, let's see. I'll start with the one that I saw the most of, and then I'll let you, there's a couple more for sure. So Elon Musk, who we already talked about to some length in one of the previous episodes, and his involvement with the Doge, you know, department and stuff like that. Um, he had a little moment that I would say, if I was his PR person, was
Does he even have one of those?
I doubt it.
I don't
I
think that
highly doubt
exists.
it. But I was unfortunate to say the least. And so basically, the short version is he is, addressing a crowd. He is very excited. I mean, this is very obvious from like if you watch from the start of when he comes on stage all the way through, like he is like amped up.
Bro has been geeked for like a month straight, man.
Oh, for sure.
He
Yeah.
is.
And
He's having the time of his life.
we kind of cannot, in my opinion, we kind of can't even talk about this without once again mentioning, kind of a well-known fact about him, which is that I believe the specific diagnosis is Asperger's, but
Yeah.
he has a form of autism.
I believe that it's hard to talk on other people's disabilities, of course, but
Right.
I think Asperger's is technically like dissolved now. It's all
Yeah. I know they've
ASD,
kind of redefined it, and yeah.
but yeah, he's a little quirky.
Yeah. He's got, and the only reason this is really relevant to mention, in my opinion, is that it does literally affect his behavior, and it's something that is somewhat obvious to from the outside looking in. So that entire time that he's on stage, he's going crazy. He's doing all these gestures and mannerisms, and it's all kind of like, wow, like who gave this guy a 5-hour energy or whatever. Um, and then essentially he gets to a point when he's speaking and he says, well, actually, first he does a gesture. And that gesture, I won't do it in its completion.
I think you can do it. I probably can't do it.
I'm not going to do the whole thing. But he starts by putting his hand on his heart. And then he extends his arm out towards the crowd. And the exact manner in which he did it does, I think, in my opinion, if you're trying to be really unbiased, it does objectively kind of look like something bad, we'll just say, right? And that bad thing is related to World War II, and it's related to the Nazi regime
And the funny mustache guy.
Yeah, and something that was commonly thrown around as a gesture during that time. And so basically the internet sees this, immediately starts going crazy. They go, Elon just did this and blah, blah, blah. It's on mainstream news. It's all over Twitter. Like
Day
everyone's freaking
one.
out about it. Yeah.
Day one. Project 2025 is real.
Right, exactly. Day one, right off the bat. And I mean, I think in real time, this was like a couple hours after the official swearing in. It was pretty quick. So the other thing that, kind of needs to be mentioned is that just seconds later, like the clip that is, going viral is exactly what I just described, right? It's just a short, brief moment where he does this gesture. Well, literally seconds later, he kind of turns around, he does it again in a different direction. And then he turns back around and he puts his hand on his heart again, the same way that he did the first times. Except this time he leaves it there and he says, "My heart goes out to you," or something like that, right?
Yeah.
And,
he's literally throwing his heart out. Now, a normal person may have done something like this.
Right. or even, this is the one that gets me, is like his palm. It's kind of funny.
It is funny. And what's funny about it, right, is because people think it's something bad.
Right. It's because people assume that it's like actually like some kind of subliminal mission, like
dog
whatever.
whistle.
But like, I think for those who are kind of being more realistic about it, it's just like, oh, like that was an unfortunate, an unfortunate. But anyways, his palms kind of stayed downward, like as where if I were to gesture something similar, I would turn my hand up as if I was distributing something.
Or even double-handed, maybe.
He tosses it like an overhead frisbee, like
my heart goes out to you.
It was, yeah. So it's crazy though, because while we're kind of getting a laugh out of it and like kind of, like I said, able to recognize that that's not what was happening.
Well, that would be ridiculous.
Yeah, that's not the appropriate way to interpret it, any of that. There are plenty of people who are taking it very seriously and think exactly like we said, like, there it is, confirmation of everything that I've been saying about what this cabinet is, what they stand for, and all this stuff. And it's just like, honestly, I think there are several layers to how that doesn't make sense, and they're not even worth going through, because at some point you hit a layer that basically asks the question of whether or not it is actually. I'm trying to think how to put this. Basically, there's this World War II guy we always reference, right? Big bad guy, one of the baddest guys of all time. Everybody knows him. He's notorious. Why are people making the assumption that that's what they aim to be? Like, if they are bad, okay, if they do want to do all these terrible things that some people believe they're going to do, in my opinion, it just doesn't even make sense to start there. Like, why?
They'd want to
What?
be worse.
Like, what's the association? That's what I'm saying. Like, why not want to be worse? Why not want to be your own new terrible regime? Like, I don't know. I think it's weird that people even think that they're just a legacy, like a carrying on a legacy type thing.
Well, and then especially in that particular legacy, which team's on Israel's side?
Yeah. Yeah. Well,
but yeah, anyway,
lots of layers.
dude was geeked, and that was hilarious. I think it's a oopsies moment. um and let's take anything funny away from it, uh, and it wasn't even proper, right?
Right.
Like
This is
if
the
it would
other
have
thing.
been full blown,
Yes.
hail to God,
Yeah.
then okay, but it
Yeah.
wasn't,
Yeah.
right? Like it was still a little crooked, whatever. So they're just, they were sitting there like taking notes, trying to find anything, like you said
Yeah.
earlier.
Now, this is the other thing that I think is actually a pretty like relevant point, is that people are suggesting, because it looks so similar, that it's like blatantly that's what it is. But like, that's not even accurate, because if that's blatantly what it is, then he didn't do it very well.
He didn't do it
Like,
right. Yeah,
yeah, he did like
get
a
that guy
very
out of here. He's
right.
like,
Exactly. I'm not suggesting like you should have or anything like that, but I'm just saying, like, if that's
that's
the
obviously not what it was.
yeah, if that's going to be the premise of your argument, that that is exactly what the gesture is, then it's like, no, from a starting point, that's not even close. Like, he had a flat palm hand, whatever. We don't need to go into the details of the salute there, but
It was not 45-degree angles.
yeah, didn't click his heels together. Anyways, so that's probably the biggest, first crazy thing that came of the day, in my opinion.
Yeah,
Um,
there are definitely a couple gaffes that are, they're not a big deal. They're kind of funny for the most part. Like or a little bit of sad, a little bit of funny. Like during Trump getting sworn in, Melania was supposed to bring, the family Bible up, and people were like in her way, and they're trying to get stuff done. So Trump, I mean, he starts doing the oath without Melania there. So, a lot of libs are also, sticking onto that. Oh, well, he didn't swear on the Bible. What's up with that?
right.
That kind of thing.
Which another detail about that is, like you said, Melania was kind of like she kind of was just sort of behind somebody, like she had a shoulder behind somebody, and she had to like actually kind of walk, like, walk around to get up there. And the other thing is that the guy, whoever the guy is that's like walking him through that and telling him, what to actually recite for the swearing in, he doesn't tell him to place his hand on the Bible. Like, he's the one that kind of like missed it, because usually what happens in any of those exchanges in court and swearing ins and stuff like that is they say, raise your right hand, place your left hand on the Bible, and repeat after me. Like, that's like what you say. He just says, raise your right hand and repeat after me. Like, Melania is not up there yet. It was kind of like, it was kind of, a little bit quick in its cadence, in my opinion. And then they start going with it. So like, I don't think it's Melania's fault. I don't think it's Trump's fault. And I don't really blame the guy that was coordinating it. I think it was just an oops. Like, that's it. It was just like we,
and she got up there, and I mean,
yeah,
I'm
stood next to
assuming
him.
This isn't the first time Trump has done his oath either.
Right.
I don't
Yeah.
think it expires.
Yeah. That's right. He, during the swearing in 2016, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Well,
he
beginning of 17, right?
For
January 17th.
Yeah, January. But during that one, he did in fact place his hand on the Bible. So it was just kind of an awkward, like, I don't know what you call that, but a hiccup, if nothing else, that some people ran with. What's another good one? Let's see. Uh, Read the notes for a second. I think the Gulf of America is very interesting.
It's funny. I get it. I mean, South America, Central America, North America.
Yeah.
Mexico's just one little piece of that.
Right. Right.
I get it, I guess. Now, if it was the Gulf of the United States of America, that's,
Yeah, that would be
could be a little bit harder to swallow.
yeah. Yeah, so
But
basically, the suggestion is that like Trump wants to take back the Panama Canal um, for a variety of reasons. I think the main one being that I guess China runs it now is the claim. I've actually never even heard about this. I really had no idea about a single authority controlling the Panama Canal or anything like that. But
I'm
Trump says,
assuming with how much business goes through there, China definitely has their hand in it.
yeah,
You know,
yeah. So Trump, it makes the argument that this is, basically against, like because we had such a big part in establishing the Panama Canal in the first place, and then we gifted it to Panama. And so he basically says we need to take it back. Panama doesn't even have it anymore, and it's time for us to kind of like spread our power a little bit. And so he wants to take it back. And he wants to rename the Gulf of Mexico to the Gulf of America, which I think it's a really interesting suggestion for two reasons. One, because it's one of those things that like doesn't actually matter. Like it
it
doesn't
doesn't
have
matter at all.
yeah, it doesn't have any actual effect on anything as far as I know. Like and also it sounds super vain and tacky and like petty, right? It quite frankly, it does sound like just one of those things. Like,
Calling it Trump's border wall or
exactly.
Obamacare.
Yeah, and suggesting that the other side was going to pay for the wall, stuff like that. Like it just sounds like one of those like things that's just kind of like, um. So yeah, um,
Another thing I thought was funny, and I looked this up. Apparently, he's done it multiple times. I tend to not watch Joe Biden speak at all, but whenever there's mention of Trump becoming the next president, well, now currently the president,
yeah,
Biden will, you know,
yeah,
kind of say a little prayer, and I think that's really rude, especially at the inauguration. He did it at the inauguration.
yeah,
When people, began cheering, he's clapping, and then he goes like, which would be fine if it was sincere, right?
mm,
If he's like, oh, God bless this man, help him lead this country in a prosperous way, blah blah blah. But he's laughing about it, right?
right,
Like it's a joke to him,
right,
which I think is kind of, especially at his party, essentially.
right.
You know what I mean?
Well, and I'll say this. I mean, I think it's a decent transition to kind of talk more about the actual details of how it went. But you said it was kind of rude, and that got me thinking about Trump's actual inaugurals. What do they call it? His speech, basically.
Mm-hmm.
Uh,
Address.
yes, that's what it is. Inaugural address. So, that's basically the first opportunity for the new president to tell you what he's about. Basically, like it's like, all right, you're the president now. Address the world. And Trump's was crazy. I
Yep.
mean,
He got
I mean,
right into it.
yeah, it was. I mean, he did not hold back. Not only did he do kind of his usual thing, which is I'm trying to think how to put this. He didn't hold back at all on saying like things have been bad and I want to make them better.
Yeah.
And so that detail of things have been bad, he really kind of elaborated on, and basically it wound up being this awkward situation where Trump is just standing there, the new president, talking about how great these next 4 years are going to be, and just right in front of him, just blatantly saying how absolutely trash the last 4 years have been, right in front of the president and vice president that are responsible for him. Now, do I think this is inappropriate? No, he's right. They've been absolutely
He's right.
trash, and most of America thinks that. Like that's the thing. But it was a little bit awkward to watch. It was like, holy smokes, he's roasting them.
Well, he kind of has to, because the whole reason he is president again is because how bad the last 4 years have been.
Yeah, no, I
We
think
wouldn't have needed Trump again if Biden could have done an okay job.
yeah,
Would we have wanted him? Yeah, but would we have needed him? Would he have instantly won the Republican primary?
right,
Would so many of people change sides?
Right.
if Biden would have been good. Yeah, it is a little rude, I guess, but I mean, business time. Day one started yesterday.
Well, and the other thing about this is that there's kind of a I think there's kind of two sides to look at it, which is one, just their performance, right? Like if Biden was a great guy, people loved him, but he just managed to do a bad job. He was just kind of one of those like we've had
George W. Bush.
I was gonna say we've had a couple presidents like that. That just they had a term where people were just felt like they were just inadequate. It wasn't necessarily that they were uh
Jimmy
weaponizing.
Carter. Jimmy
Yeah,
Carter was a great guy for us the soul.
right. Anyways, the other angle is obviously kind of more personal. It's more of a like an affront at their character. And that's what it felt like this really was. It was like it was not just you've done a bad job, but you guys particularly suck. You suck at your job. You suck in general. People don't like you. Uh, Nobody wants you around anymore, type thing. And you got the same feeling and sense when we saw Biden actually exit, and they left in the helicopter, and they do kind of a formal thing where the new president and vice president stand there and wave them off. Basically, it was like a celebration. It was like a like bye bye. Like
Yeah.
you know.
Thanks for
So
the keys.
yeah, exactly. So, well, I mean, plenty to say there, but ultimately, I do think it's kind of one of those subjective things where it just depends on which side of the aisle you fall on, who you agreed with, what policies you think take priority. In general, I voted for Trump proudly, happily, think it was the right choice, for plenty of reasons, and yeah, I do think that the alternative that we managed to avoid renewing was just a joke, just like not even not just not good for the country, not just not better than the option I voted for, but also just plainly bad, just nothing real to offer that I thought was going to improve my life and make our country better in general.
Yeah, it's like if you had Verizon and then you switch to T-Mobile and you're like, oh dude, this sucks. My bill went up, my service is worse.
Yeah,
I'm going back to Verizon.
right. Right.
Insert your preferred mobile carrier
Yeah,
there.
yeah, we're not. I don't know. I don't know how T-Mobile is, but um, you want to start with you want to talk about Biden's kind of final move?
Yeah. Super bizarre, the premature pardons of his family, and even worse, Dr. Anthony Fauci and the January 6th committee.
Mm-hmm.
Might as well put all the, Pizzagate people in there or something too, something crazy, right? Because in what world, in what possible thing could Dr. Fauci be accused of and put on trial for that does not resonate with what conspiracy theorists have said?
Yeah, so this is the big question, right? Is like, uh, in my opinion, it almost sounds too simple. It's like, oh, it's got to be more complicated than that, or there's got to be something we don't understand about, pardoning or whatever. But I fail to see what that is, what it is that we're missing, what makes it more complicated. You don't need to pardon someone that's innocent.
Right.
Period. That's it. Like
Right.
the point of a pardon is to excuse, to forgive, to overlook somebody's wrongdoing with regard, like in the eyes of the law, right?
Right.
Like that's pretty much it. That's like
And
the
should
whole.
be used extremely rare as
Yes,
well.
yeah, extremely conservatively, extremely, so not only there's that element, but also yeah, like why the heck pardon these people?
Like, I can forgive and understand pardoning Hunter Biden. I would pardon my own son. I get it.
Sure,
I
yeah,
get it.
there's at least a reason that you can wrap your head around.
Right. But I think Liz Cheney was one of them. You think Trump's just going to arrest her for no reason? Or was January 6th a fraud?
Yeah,
Either you're admitting that January 6th was a fraud and giving credence to conspiracy theories, or you think Trump is just going to start arresting people?
well,
Like,
that's good.
right.
I don't know which one actually frustrates me more, because pardoning his family is like, okay, whatever. Like, you don't want your family to get caught up in the dirty, ins and outs of politics, and maybe they could somehow associate him with stuff that happened with Hunter. That okay, sure. Pardoning Fauci is just it's just gross in my opinion, because Fauci is just there's so many people that kind of want to call him to like kind of responsibility for some things that happen. And
Well, I mean,
again,
yeah,
if he's
stocks that he
innocent,
owns.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, stocks and stuff like that, yeah. But if he's innocent, why pardon? Right? So in my head, it almost confirms that something bad was going on there. And then lastly, the January 6th committee. I personally think that might be the worst one,
Yeah, yeah.
because not only I think the forming of that committee in the first place is something that's so questionable and just like suspicious and weird. But then what everything they wound up going through, and the way that some of these protesters were prosecuted against, and all of this being used as a giant battering ram against Trump, and just it's like I don't know. I just find it so
I
you know
mean, it is a just a display of misused money, of political weaponization of the justice system. I mean, it's literally just it's like a what are those called? Uh, science displays,
oh, like a
convention.
project,
What is it
like
called?
like I was thinking science project, but you're talking
Yeah,
about
like a science fair where you
yeah,
show
fair,
like your projects. They have like the display board, right?
yeah.
That it says pardoning January 6th committee. Like
Yes.
that is their display of the fact that they were full of shit. Like, how is it not? It's them agreeing, yeah, oh yeah, there was either, yeah, maybe we were wrong, there's nothing there, we wasted a bunch of money, whatever, or this was fabricated.
Well, and honestly, I don't even. I mean, I personally don't know that I think that that's the only conclusion. Like I do think there's plenty about January 6th that was at the very least, like best case scenario, blown out of proportion. Um, Whether or not it happened at all, I'm not sure. But what I think, the other thing is just the way that, again, the way they acted. Like there's several people who were there and present, and basically, like I'll just say, basically did nothing wrong at all. They wound up getting sentenced to jail time and all kinds of stuff like that. Just as because it all fell under the same hammer, basically.
Right.
And so what I'm concerned about is that I think Trump has suggested that he would pardon the people, most of the people
He
involved.
just did
Oh,
like
okay.
like 1100 or so people.
Okay.
um
Yeah.
but the fact that 1100 people were arrested,
Yeah. 1,100 is crazy.
and I don't know if you've watched the videos. I mean, the cops are opening the doors. They're high-fiving and
Yeah.
stuff.
I've seen some
Like,
interesting.
so I mean, when they're high-fiving and is it embarrassing? Was January 6th embarrassing? Absolutely.
Yeah. Was
Do
it
I?
objectively wrong? Yes. I mean, I would say
Yeah.
to at the extent that it got out of hand, and that some people obviously started acting inappropriately and escalating the situation, stuff like that. Yes, wrong. I don't think it was wrong for them to protest there in the first place, and I don't think it was wrong the people that were obviously invited in, and the way that the whole narrative is actually a little different than what we've been told. But it's like we've said. I know we've made this joke, but if that was really an insurrection, they did a pretty bad job. They
Yeah.
didn't have a single pitchfork, not a single gun. It was like,
I think it was entrapment, essentially. They
yeah,
knew people were going to go there being rowdy, so they let them in, and
right,
then they said, "Look at all these rowdy people."
right, yeah. So
Embarrassing,
yeah,
surely embarrassing.
it's tough. It's a bad beat, because I don't know. I do wish that. I mean, I think that for Biden to have done those pardons, not only done them, but it's also important to mention that he did them the not just the day of the inauguration, but also pretty decently late into the day. Trump said several times it was during his speech, but I don't really know that that lined up
Not,
with when I.
I don't think the inaugural address, the earlier one.
Oh, okay,
So I believe, I'm not sure
gotcha.
because I
Well, yeah,
Biden was at the address, I
right,
believe. So
yeah, yeah. So pretty early in the day, like while ceremonial stuff is like preparing to take place and all that, Biden just like comes in last minute and it's like, just completely cleans the slate of all these people that we very obviously have questions about. And and the other thing that's tough about it, it's like, Trump was kind of saying this to the press later in the day, but it's not really clear or evident. He hasn't really stated that he was interested in doing kind of the revenge tour, so to speak, where he like he prioritized getting back at them. Like that hasn't been something that I've heard him communicating. Um,
Even though he'd be just in doing it, I
right,
believe. But then they poured the cement of the precedent, right?
right,
If he shot back, then the
yeah,
cement is hardened.
yeah. Well, and that's what I was going to say is that the precedent is the thing that's really the most like that's the greatest consequence of the whole situation is
Right.
like you know
I,
plus
th- I think Ben Shapiro said this last when the election was still, kind of up for debate and we weren't sure that Trump was going to win and all that. He basically said because of the political and weaponization of the justice system, that whoever runs for president in the future is they either win or they get arrested. Right? If that's the precedent you set,
yeah,
you know, campaign finance laws, all kinds of like crazy,
yeah,
impossible things for a normal person to keep up with.
yeah.
Uh,
Well, I mean, freaking let's not get into the details of the fact that that Trump was officially ruled, not ruled, but what's the verdict? Found guilty, I guess, or whatever. As a felon, right?
yeah. Yep.
Which is just like the details of that case and what really is happening and stuff like that are just crazy. Unfortunately, a lot of just like misinformed people think that the main issue is that he paid Stormy Daniels to keep quiet and blah blah. No, that's actually perfectly legal to have her sign an NDA and blah blah blah. Like, yeah, it's crazy. But no,
Yeah.
I agree. I think the stakes recently have obviously been. I mean, and that was basically the question some of us were asking. It was, is Trump going to be president, or is he going to be dead, or is he
You're
going to
right.
be in jail? Like that's it. Like
Yeah,
dead or
absolutely.
in jail or actually president. It's just like
Right.
it's crazy that things got escalated that high.
Well, and he has so much crap to clean up. I don't think he has time to try to put, certain people in jail. Like
I
why
agree,
why would you? Yeah.
and I do think that. Actually, my other opinion is that even if he does decide to kind of go that route and kind of try and get back a little bit at certain people, I don't think he's going to do it himself. I think he's picked people specifically for those responsibilities in the rest of his cabinet.
Right. Yeah, and then him pardoning the January 6th people is debatable, right? Except it's debatable until you take in the premise on if January 6th, if those people were wrongfully arrested, essentially,
Yeah,
which, I personally believe they were. I don't know if the proper political stance is that they were, because I know a lot of conservatives have been kind of like, oh, why they pardon him? But pardon them regardless.
yeah.
Um, one thing I wanted to hear your opinion on. Uh, some people think this was a gaffe. Some people think, they didn't think anything negative of it because they agree with the premise. But that was Trump saying, "quote I was saved by God to make America great again," in reference to him being shot and
Hmm.
turning his head the last second.
Hmm.
I wanted to know your opinion on if if that's something God would even would he play with our little mortal selves like that
Hmm.
to the point of sparing somebody, and whether he did or didn't, is that something insane for Donald Trump to say?
Oh man, that's that's kind of a big question.
It's a good question, yeah.
Yeah, but I'll say I'm trying to think of how to say this.
And you can start, if you would like, by saying if you think Donald Trump's statement was true.
Okay. So yeah, that's probably the easiest one to address, actually, whether or not I think it's true. And the very, very conclusive answer is I have no idea. Right.
Mm,
Like quite frankly, it's just I don't know the ways that God works. I won't claim to. Even even what implications we get of his character and some of the ways that he acts in and throughout the Bible, I don't think give us permission to determine that that's how he's going to you know continually act in our lives today or anything like that, right? So that's thing number one. I don't know. Thing number two, as far as like whether or not it was, I'll say crazy to say, I do think there's a part of me that kind of just like cringes at the statement a little bit for one reason, which is that it it claims to know, like kind of just like what I was unwilling to do just now. It claims to know the reason behind God's actions.
It's a little definitive, right?
Yes, it's a
Like
little bit
God
like
saved me.
right.
Yeah.
And not only that, it would be one thing to say God saved my life for a reason. Like that is not claiming to know the exact reason. It's just claiming that like I feel a sense of like purpose in like it's first of all accrediting God with the idea that your life was saved because of him. That's perfectly fine. And then it's also saying that you feel a sense of purpose related to that. That's also fine. But then when you blatantly directly say this is why, that's like claiming to, basically just claiming to know God's actions. Like God saved my life so that I would make America great again. And it's like, I don't know. Some people have like prophetic, visions of like, what their life is for basically. And some people do feel that you are able to and allowed to have a clear sense of what, God's plans are for you through prayer and trust. And, that's something that I kind of, not only do I think I don't really have it figured out, but I also just don't think I could even speak to it if I did, but, and then lastly, whether or not that is a thing that God does. On that one, I'm actually inclined to say yes. I think, well, and I
Especially
say,
in the Old Testament, right?
yeah,
It's
I
been a
say
while.
yes carefully so as to not contradict my very first answer and claim that I know the way that God works today. But I do think, like in my opinion, again, not making a definitive claim of what it actually is, but in my opinion, I think it is likely the case that God does intervene in life sometimes, and does so to bring to fruition his plan, whatever that may be. So that could be saving someone's life for a particular reason. That could be putting someone, I mean, that could be allowing someone to endure something for a particular reason, like the opposite, like having someone experience a near death experience or allowing that, whatever. I don't know.
Yeah.
It gets kind of tricky because
It's potentially one of the most consequential acts of divine intervention in our lifetime, for sure,
yeah,
if that is the case.
right.
And I think we both would have agreed with Trump's statement more if he would have said, I believe
Yeah,
God. Say, those two little words in the beginning
yeah,
definitely would have made a big difference there.
yeah,
But
sure.
definitely interesting, because I mean there are some people that are like, hell yeah, he did. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah. In general, I'll say for every two people I see that hate Trump and are spreading some agenda driven craziness about him, there's at least one person I see that is like, thank you God for Donald Trump, and it's like full blown attributing
Yeah.
God's plan to him. So, which I think is pretty interesting.
Yeah. Speaking of attacks on Donald Trump, it I found it pretty interesting their confidence, that nothing would happen today,
Mm,
or yesterday, I guess.
hmm
I was a little scared with them potentially doing it outside, and then they moved it inside, so that was
yeah,
good.
yeah,
But we found out that there was no designated survivor
right,
set. Uh, I'm assuming by the administration, they probably set it themselves, and
right,
that is essentially someone who would take over the presidency in the event of a major terrorist attack, at the inauguration. Right? Let's say a bomb blew up and killed everyone there. Right?
hmm
America would not have had a lead. I mean, I'm sure down the line somewhere, right, we would have
hmm
figured it out,
hmm
but there was not a set designated person. And
Yeah.
is that from confidence that nothing was going to happen, or was it in confidence that if something did happen, it wouldn't have mattered anymore? You know.
Yeah, that's tough to say. I mean, it's kind of like, I think it's kind of like placing the hand on the Bible for me, where it's like, if it was on purpose at all, then maybe we can, read something out of it and go, why did this happen? But it's kind of like, unless they blatantly, which I'm unaware of the information that has happened, but unless they blatantly rejected assigning a designated survivor, then I would just more easily assume that it was kind of an oversight than
Mm,
a choice,
yeah, it's
but
definitely possible. They're busy.
yeah, but I will say, that is something that's like mildly sketchy. Not even just the concept of a designated survivor, because quite frankly, if we ever use the designated survivor, like, we're already so doomed. Like, if that
Yeah.
entire room of people winds up disappearing somehow, it's just such a terrible and scary day. Um, but yeah, so I was thinking about that too, though. Like, man, just don't let anything happen. Just don't. I just don't want to see another scary and tragic and awful circumstance where somebody is, just trying to do the worst. And honestly, this is kind of terrible, but I even thought that with regard to the row of, I like the term, people have been calling them the broligarchs, which
Yeah.
is, all the tech bros that are, make up half of the world's greatest wealth.
Right.
Um, but yeah, you look in that row and you see Elon, wealthiest man in the world at like 400 billion, and then you see Bezos second at like 250, and then you see uh uh
Zuckerberg.
yeah, Zuckerberg next after that. And it's like at one point I sat there thinking about it for a second. I was like, I think that's about $1.5 trillion in net worth in that one row, which is just crazy to think about. But yeah, if something were to happen, like, holy moly, would that be a you know an earthquake?
Right.
So
Right. Speaking of Zuckerberg, I think it's very interesting how he seems to kind of be coming around. It's like he's going through some kind of midlife crisis or something. He's wearing gold chains and got his hair all poofed out and
yeah.
riding the MAGA train potentially.
Yeah, so that's actually, that's one of those things that's kind of happened recently that we forgot to mention earlier. But yeah, Zuckerberg not only making some changes like you're talking about, some things as far as like, his appearances and kind of the way he even speaks and stuff, but also recently announced that Facebook was going to be dialing back its fact checking system and kind of changing the way that works. And he even mentioned some, I forget exactly what his wording was, but it was something along the lines of like hoping to work in alignment with Trump, basically, where it was like he kind of just blatantly said, um, we're kind of switching sides, so to speak, right?
Right. Yeah.
Um, I personally associate this with a couple things, and to keep it brief, he did an episode with Joe Rogan last week, which was pretty recently after his announcement about the Facebook changes, which was already controversial. And so on Rogan, he talks pretty, he talks extensively about it, and I do think he's being somewhat authentic, and that it is somewhat true what he says, which is essentially like, I started this whole thing because I was interested in people being able to talk to each other, and I was interested, like, I appreciated the value of speech essentially and communication, which I think is like largely true. I think he also was like a college kid that was trying to get rich, right? And he succeeded. But
He
um,
definitely succeeded.
yeah, but the other thing is, you know, I almost think this is kind of understated in people's evaluation, but he goes on for a while with him talking about how he's kind of recently started doing jujitsu and like, you know, actively and consistently um, doing martial arts, and how big of a change he thinks that's been for him. And like, it seems, I don't know, it seems almost a little bit silly to contribute so much to that, or attribute so much to that. But I can't help but feel like that makes sense. You take this like very nerdy, socially awkward, kind of like disassociated guy, and all of a sudden he's like, seems a little bit more like real, a little bit more authentic, a little bit more like comfortable with himself, a little bit, less like he's, I don't know, has never had a conversation with another person, and all of a sudden,
Lizard man.
yeah, yeah, and all of a sudden he's just like kind of like a little more well rounded and seems like a normal person, and I think that it makes a lot of sense for that to be pretty directly the consequence of him just kind of finding a niche, a particular thing that an outlet, so to speak, that like really, I don't
Yeah,
know,
no, I get what you're saying.
yeah,
There's discipline involved in that, and the other half of it, I'm sure, is the absolute beatdown that the Biden administration and the DNC have given him for years and
yeah,
years.
yeah. Which he
Um,
talked extensively about that too, how he didn't appreciate the way that the Biden administration was essentially coming at them, like coming after them when during COVID and stuff. So
right. I think this could be an episode on its own, but we also forgot to mention the TikTok ban, the
yeah,
very short TikTok ban that
yeah,
hopefully, and because I've seen a couple, liberals I'm friends with on Facebook post, TikTok's, what would you call it, their statement saying, hey, because of Donald Trump's promises, we're back on, and
hmm
they're like, oh, it's propaganda,
hmm
but what, I mean, I don't know what TikTok has to gain from working with Donald Trump other than just getting to exist, right?
yeah.
So I don't see what's in it for them to be some kind of political
Set out.
propaganda, right? And
Yeah,
they can't it couldn't be like a campaign contribution without saying so. You know what I
right.
mean? Like,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah.
Well, so let me say one last thing about Zuckerberg before we move on, actually, and then the other thing that I think probably played a pretty significant role in this like kind of reversal we've seen, where he kind of like seems to be warming up to Trump a lot. Like, I mean, honestly, quite frankly, the fact that him and Bezos were even at his inauguration is kind of shocking, right? It's kind of
Super
like
weird.
you never would have predicted that like 4 years ago. But nonetheless, I think the other thing that made a big impact is Trump's assassination attempt. The way that Trump responded to that and handled himself, we talked about it before, but like a lot of people thought it was very, at the very least, respectable. Like there was a lot about it that was like, wow, kind of impressive. And it was, the imagery and stuff associated with it was powerful. Well, just not even very long after Zuckerberg's talking to somebody, he basically says like that was awesome. Like
Yeah.
he's like, Trump is such a
Well, I
so
mean, that
cool.
was a couple words come to mind, right? Leader is one of
Yeah,
them,
yeah,
right? A man is one of them.
right, sure, yeah,
Neither of which you don't see a lot of masculinity and leadership roles in these political positions anymore, right? It's not
Mhm.
like the old days where it was army generals becoming president,
Right,
right? Like, for the most part, most presidents are that they've been government employees their whole life, right?
right.
So to see this, I mean, absolute unit taking a bullet to the head and getting up and going, "We're gonna fucking win, we're gonna
Yeah.
freaking win." Sorry.
um, yeah. So yeah, I think that probably played a pretty big impact too. I think he saw that and he just thought, like, I've already had some questions about all these things that people are telling me about this guy, but like now I actually want to get to figure out more about him. Maybe I don't know. That's just a guess. But anyway, on the TikTok thing, yeah, that's also very relevant. Basically, TikTok, absolutely massive app, popular with youths and
Popular
or
with
the
me.
Youths. Yeah,
I'm on
yeah.
it all the
I
time.
I appreciate it too, but basically, it's been controversial for a while because it's a Chinese owned app, and there's no reason. I don't know that this is something that's been proved or not, but there's basically no reason to assume they're not harvesting our data with it, right? That's like almost definitely happening.
I think the only thing that we have is them saying they are.
Yeah,
And I think, if they could prove that or sell to an American company, there's no reason to get rid of them, right?
yeah.
Give them a chance to prove it. We're not even talking to them, I don't think.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so one way or another, the government basically ruled, went all the way up to the Supreme Court and blah, blah, blah. And they basically decided TikTok's getting banned because we can't have this Chinese data collector, being used by, you know, 2 million Americans or whatever. Well, there aren't, yeah, no, 2 million Americans.
That's got to be
Three,
more than 2 million.
yeah, yeah. no, it's way more, but I was just making up a number. So, anyways, um, and so TikTok's supposed to get banned the day before the inauguration, and then TikTok goes dark for like 12 hours, then all of a sudden it's back, and like you said, it has a message on there, and it says like Trump. Thanks to Trump, we were able to extend the time in which we're so basically it's kind of up in the air right now as to whether or not TikTok will definitely be banned or will not. And like you just mentioned, it's pretty much hinging on whether or not we can either agree to enter into some kind of contract with the current owners, or we can sell the U.S. portion of it, so to speak, to an American or to
Someone other than ByteDance. Mr. Beast wants it.
yeah,
Uh,
which I thought was pretty
yeah,
interesting.
I'm sure Elon would take it. I don't. He's probably running low on funds with all of his other projects, but
Yeah, yeah. I think Mr. Beast owning it would actually be. I think it would actually be terrible. I'll be honest. Main reason being that he is obsessed with YouTube. Like he is just like I don't know if you've ever watched one of his like long form videos where he talks in depth about how he's gotten where he is. But the man
don't
is
think so.
just it does not stop thinking about YouTube and the algorithms and how to do better
Well,
and
he's
better
been
and better.
on YouTube for what, 15
Yeah,
years? You know,
right. Yeah, and he's like almost the number one at this point. And I think if he were to own TikTok, then not only would that focus shift from YouTube to TikTok, but I think his kind of like hyper obsession, like his like the way he just like goes over the top with it, would kind of I don't know. I think it would somehow wind up affecting the app. Like maybe there would be too many TikTok or too many Mr. Beast plugs or too
every
many
five
ads.
swipes, the
Yeah,
Feastables chocolate
yeah,
bar.
feasible. Yeah, who
Uh,
knows? Who knows what that would actually look
TikTok
like?
is brought to you by Honey.
Right? Yeah, yeah. But yeah. Anyways, that's just my 2 cents on that. But
Yeah.
I think we're definitely drawing in towards the end of the episode here. Um, I mean, I feel like we covered a lot, but we couldn't even really like some of this stuff is so in depth to experience and watch live that we
We
haven't
need a
certainly.
few hours per
Yeah,
thing.
exactly,
You know.
exactly. Let's see. I'm just double checking our notes real quick, make sure there's nothing that we missed.
I know you wanted to talk about conspiracy theories from the left, I believe, right?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I don't know. I'm not feeling so motivated at this point because we already we kind of
We,
talked about
we
just the way that
touched on them.
we touched on the way that ultimately it's just a problem of the opposite side of the aisle, so to speak, or people that don't like Trump, disagree with Trump, how radically differently they think and perceive things than we do. Like we covered this a little bit when we were just talking about Elon and his little gaffe, which is that we see it and we go, "Oh, like that
Yeah.
was a
Oh,
that
that
was a
was
close
funny.
one. That looked kind of that looked kind of bad." And it's like that's it. That's the end of it. They see it as an actual the worst thing that it could be, and it's confirmation of all these the worst case scenarios that they've been fearing. And I don't know, I just think people have been talking for a while about how the country is getting more and more divided and how social media is not helping. And I don't know, man, I hope that starts to heal, because I feel like I'll tell you, especially when you experience it in real life. I have a friend that I talk to rather frequently that sees things very differently from me. I get my hair cut. I almost don't want to say this because I don't want to but if she ever sees it, I appreciate the heck out of her as a haircut, but it's for cutting my hair. But I get my hair cut by somebody who sees things very differently from me, and it's just like I'm super big, as I mentioned before on here. I'm super big on conversation, on thinking critically, on like I want to be able to talk about anything with anyone and just have a conversation about it. I think that it is fundamentally important to our existence, let alone our culture and our democracy and our republic and stuff like that. Um, and so that's my top priority, but that's not everyone's. And so it can be tough.
Yeah,
But yeah,
absolutely. People get kind of cemented into their ways, and to me the only way to really grow is to have those I have what if conversations that I don't even kind of think are real. You know
yeah,
what I mean? But firing those synapses of thought is the
yeah,
only way to keep thinking.
yeah. Which that kind of gets me thinking about one last thing, and I think this is like find notes to close on if you're okay with that. But I don't want that to. I say that, and I accuse people of kind of not thinking about things from multiple angles and not being open to talking about things that they don't believe and stuff like that. And I don't want that to appear or to sound like hypocritical for us to be saying, because we might appear to have this little like echo chamber going on where we obviously both agree on a lot and see eye to eye on a lot and voted the same way, and generally draw the same conclusive opinion when something happens. Like, but I think both of us really do actively try and practice making sure our ideas and our beliefs and our conclusions are resilient, not just by thinking them through and comparing and contrasting them to, alternatives, but also by actually challenging them, right? We challenge them against each other. Like, one of us will play devil's advocate all the time on different topics. And, I think both of us are perfectly open to and willing to have conversations with people that disagree. And we partake in those. And like, like I mentioned, I'm open to just have a conversation about anything. Like, we can keep it simple. We can be chill. Let's talk. And I really do try and practice that throughout my life on social media and everywhere. And so really, all of that's not to excuse anything, but also just to throw it out there that like, this isn't supposed to be necessarily a place where we're, challenging our, current, what do they call that, predispositions or anything like that. Like, this is just a place where we, like like we say in our intro, are just talking about our experiences and our lives and the way we perceive them. So
Yeah.
I don't know.
So I was pretty stoked for yesterday.
Yeah, exactly. I was pretty stoked too. I watched most of it live, and it really felt like kind of felt like a significant moment to be able to experience.
And
So
I hope the healing begins. He's got a lot of work to do. Um, I remember as a kid, like, we talked about China as like, oh, those guys are gonna be trouble eventually, and I feel like we're really getting to the point where it's like they're trouble. You know what I mean?
yeah,
So hopefully our you know, inner country conversations go well, and we can all kind of be safe and happy. And the Middle East, Gaza and Palestine's cleaning up, it looks like, so it's a good
man. I'll tell
start.
you what. Yeah, that's a big one too. We didn't even really talk about that yet, but I'll just simply say I'm so glad to see hostages being released, and whether or not it lasts, even if it's a temporary thing, I hope that the fighting you know slows down, because
We've evolved past bullets. We should be using money
right,
for everything.
right. Well,
Money and
I
brain.
don't. I don't know. That's interesting. You're saying money. You're saying war should be fought with bank accounts, not
Well, what I
not
mean is
soldiers.
negotiation, right? Like,
Oh, sure, yeah,
they can buy half the strip, you know, east and west side. Like
yeah,
we can talk things out. What it's essentially going to boil down the money. It's negotiation. Yeah, you know what
yeah,
I mean. We can create peace rather than bombing each other.
yeah. That would be nice. I mean, I do think that this is kind of an exemplary, like a good example of how that may never be applicable everywhere, because these are two. Uh, okay, let me think that up with it. These are two different places or peoples or whatever, organizations, whatever, that like I'll just say coexisting is not really on there. Is not really a great or easy thing for them to achieve. So like, I do agree that in this day and age, I think we should be able to negotiate most things. I think we should be exercising the diplomacy to be able to like avoid conflict in most of the world. Like, this is probably one of the best examples of a place that's like way a long ways off from that.
It's like they get the Temple Mound every other weekend.
Holy smokes! Yeah, you should call up the White House tomorrow and suggest that.
Yeah, yeah, good idea. Put me in, coach. Let me talk to him.
Yeah. Well, that yeah, I think that pretty well concludes another episode of the Just Regular Guys podcast. Um,
See ya.
yeah.